video games have a strong power to evoke emotions, whether it's the ones intended by the game developers or the ones derived from the meanings we give to them. Games manage to hit harder than any other form of media, and there's a few reasons as to why that is. Video games have been adapting cinematography as we know it for a while now, making those experiences more engaging. Like TV shows, we get more time spent with those characters, allowing more character development. And, like movies, they are released as a whole package and not spread throughout weeks, allowing a more fluid experience with a clear division of acts. But, unlike any form of media, video games demand engagement. The inclusion of player input might seem like a given, but it significantly heightens the player's focus and creates a greater sense of immersion. The player is given agency, feeling like their actions and choices matter, even in the cases when that's not true. They're not watching it happen, they are actively making it so. That's the reason we see experiments like Netflix's Black Mirror Bandersnatch and the implementations of quick time events by game developers. They are efforts designed to try to make you feel immersed by giving the spectator game-like features like responsibilities for your choices and their consequences, or to try to make the player a part of those scenes and not a passive spectator. As the active input of the gaming world, the player is not supposed to let go of the controller, and because of that, the potential for immersion is greater. When I think about how video games makes us feel emotions, I'm often drawn to a moment in The Last of Us Part 2 that made me feel a lot of guilt. It's like magic, really. And I'm not talking in a fantasy manner, I mean magic from the real world. Let's call it the dangling keys effect. The trick as to how the great magicians are able to fool the minds of their audience relies, to the extent of my knowledge, on their ability to distract us from what's really happening. They guide our attention towards something else, represented in this analogy as a shiny, noisy object, the keys, dangling, something other than the reality of what's actually happening. In the game, we are presented with a new group of characters, Abby's group, Mel and Owen between them. I'll spare you some of the major spoilers, but there will be a few for the game. So much happens, there's a huge snowstorm. Owen tells Abby that Mel is pregnant. Ellie also has a lot going on and is dealing with the same snowstorm. Abby runs from a huge mob of infected and then she kills someone very important for Ellie. You accompany Ellie on this huge hunt for revenge. You feel the drive for it. You want it. When she faces Mel and Owen, they end up fighting and Ellie kills them both. The camera focuses our attention on their faces and the tension brewing during the whole scene, until it is revealed. The snowstorm, the mob of infected, Abby's actions, our drive for revenge, the tension, and the way the camera behaved, these are all important. But they are, for this particular moment, dangling keys. The truth behind the magic trick. They made us forget for a moment that Mel was pregnant. We knew that. From the very beginning of the game, we knew that. And if Ellie wasn't so blind on revenge and paid a little bit of attention, she would have known also. As a parallel to Ellie's blindness of revenge leading to an atrocious act, and then guilt, we feel it alongside her. I think one of the reasons the game is so controversial is because it wants you to feel anger, guilt, and sadness. And those are feelings that we have a hard time dealing with. People have grown to love these characters for years, and it's one of the reasons as to how they manage to make us care so much about them. The way they trick us into forgetting is brilliant, and it perfectly serves the scene's intent to shock us into realizing the brutality and inexcusability of our actions, and to make us second guess our path for revenge. Horror games, on the other hand, build fear and anxiety. Why people enjoy these games, myself included, might be an interesting topic for another video. But take Dead Space Remake for instance, a game of one of my favorite franchises ever. Isaac Clarke, an engineer, enters the USG Ishimura, a mining spaceship that has gone silent, in search of his girlfriend, Nicole. The Ishimura is full of those monstrous body horror creatures called the Necromorphs that Isaac fights using improvised weapons made from the technology he found on the ship. The first time we see one, it appears through a ventilation shaft. The game builds anticipation by surrounding us with those vents, which make those quiet moments of just walking through these empty corridors that much more terrifying. You can hear them crawling throughout the ship. We never know when one of these creatures might get a jump on you. On top of that, the necromorphs are made from the dead bodies of the crew, so every single body you find is a possible necromorph waiting to be turned, and those creatures only really die by dismemberment, keeping you in a constant state of paranoia, smashing bodies to bits. A lot of horror games, Dead Space included, also use the imagery of the wheelchair. It's supposed to evoke the idea of fragility, sickness, and powerlessness. Just like we are limited by the confines of our physical world, you are helpless at the mercy of that reality and its creatures. You are not, of course, but it augments the fear of the thing itself. The imagery of religious places, like temples and churches, hospitals and schools, have double meanings. As much as religious imagery is supposed to represent purity and hope, it can also represent deprivation and intolerance. Hospitals are clean places and also represent healing, but can symbolize sickness and death. Schools can be a place of learning, friendship, and innocence, or can be strict, punishing, lonely, and cruel. Even so, they are to be predominantly good places that evoke good thoughts related to purity and/or innocence that, when seen corrupted in a horror setting, can evoke some primal emotions. An empty, dark school, a dirty, infested hospital, or a satanic church. I'm usually not a huge fan of when games don't let you fight the monsters, only run or hide, because they eventually get old and you are just constantly running loops on the AI hiding in the nearest closet. But when they use this concept of powerlessness in a game that most of the time you can fight the monster, it just works brilliantly. In Dead Space 2, you begin literally with your hands tied, incapable of defending yourself, and with the only option of running from the creatures trying to get to you. In a game that you can constantly fight and defeat these creatures, being put in this position is terrifying. That's why survival horror games have limited ammo. The constant need for ammunition makes it so that you have to explore more, creating opportunities for scares. But it also creates a fear of being helpless with no ammo. When you were shown right at the start of the game just how helpless you actually are without your gun. Another way it plays on the feelings of helplessness are the elevator rides. In one of them, a necromorph tries to open the door and get to you. It reinforces the feeling that you are not safe anywhere, and even the normally safe elevator rides that are only supposed to take you from one area to another aren't safe. It's an oppressive and claustrophobic feeling made to increase tension. You can be scared and have fear of a movie, but the potential for those feelings is heightened in video games because you are an active part of them. You might fear a creature from a movie, but you don't have to run from it yourself. You might feel relief watching a hero win a fight against a villain, but you won't get the feeling of accomplishment from defeating a boss in a Souls games or the frustration from dying to them countless times before that. You might feel sad because the protagonist's pet died, but you didn't have them by your side the whole time. You might feel happy because of how the story turned out, but you're not responsible for its outcomes like in Detroit Become Human. Video games have a special power to cause emotion because they provide a platform for immersion, and its potential to have feelings projected onto them is also increased because they are not something you watched, they are something you did. You can form friendships, share moments, and create memories together. Nostalgic feelings are created because you didn't peek through a window, you immersed and interacted with its world. You not only watched and created attachments with its characters, but you feel their shoes. Marvel's Spider-Man plays on the nostalgic feelings of its audience. The developers know that generations grew up with the character and how established he is. and that's directly reflected in the game's music. It's original, yet reminiscent of its previous iterations. It's unmistakably 100% Spider-Man. You can have an emotional attachment to games because you remember the happy experience of playing them for the first time, they remind you of a happy or simpler moment in life, or they helped you to deal with a really bad one. I lost someone very special to me when I was playing Spider-Man 2. The game will always have a special place in my heart because when I needed to distract myself from reality, that was the game that helped me to do that, by providing an outlet of escapism. The ivory tower is often depicted in literature as a symbol of disconnection from reality, an extreme form of escapism. People who live their lives isolated in the tower are often unaware of the reality below them. Video games provide escapism. Whether good or bad, it's a direct consequence of balance. There's a scene in the first Harry Potter movie that greatly signifies that aspect. Harry has grown up without his parents. He's faced with a mirror that shows him his deepest desires, to be with his family. The mirror of Erised is the ultimate form of escapism from reality, that of which we wish it could be. Night after night, Harry watched the mirror to see his parents by his side. We often see reports of people who got through a tough time because a video game provided an escape valve. It may be someone who has a hard time connecting at school or someone who has a difficult situation at home. For a limited time, they are someone else and don't have to worry about these problems. Dumbledore confronts Harry about his constant visits to the mirror of Erised and decides to remove it.
It does not do to dwell on dreams, Harry, and forget to live.
Freud considered that an amount of escapist fantasy is a necessary aspect of human life. Spider-Man 2 helped me to deal with loss and sadness. I still had to face those emotions, but it helped me to manage it. I didn't have to do it all at once. I could allow myself to be somewhere else for a while. It's not content that could passively be consumed and give possibility for my thoughts to stray towards reality. During a limited time, I had to focus on it, because it demands interaction and immersion. When I was ready, I could go back and deal with reality. If escapism is beneficial, why did Dumbledore do that? When it comes to emotion, games are special. They can transmit it like the other methods, but its potential is increased by its interaction method. Games are dreams given shape. They are world limited only by our imagination and technology. They are literature, acting, music. It is an art that demands engagement from its audience. They allow you to overcome, to choose, to feel the shoes. They provide immersion, and alongside it, a heightened knowledge of escapism. Escapism is important and it can help us to deal with undesirable situations or just to provide entertainment. Who is to say how much of it we should indulge? But one thing is clear, we should not exempt ourselves from reality. Like anything in life, it requires balance. Harry was constantly indulging in the mirror's fantasy. One cannot live in the ivory tower and remove oneself from reality. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live. Thank you for watching this far. If you enjoyed the content, subscribe to see more. Share your opinions or suggestions for another topic down below. Thank you again for the overwhelming support and constructive criticism. I really appreciate it.